chain. There's also another strategic position that they're trying to establish. This is the strategic triangle in the South China Sea. We studied this during a convention and strategic meeting that we had in Japan 2 years ago. What is the strategic triangle? The first point of the triangle is on the Paracels, Woody Island. This is already operational. The second point of the triangle is still ongoing. The cluster of reclaimed artificial islands like Fiery Cross Reef, Johnson South Reef, etc., in this part, including Mischief Reef, and this is undergoing. And their last target is to have construction in the Scarborough Shoal area, and if they complete this, they will have this strategic triangle under control, and if they succeed in doing that, they will have full control of the South China Sea. That's why Scarborough Shoal is very important in the equation. Some people are asking, why fight over small rocks? You know, these are only small things. But even real estate experts like Rod Valencia here knows that even a small piece of property, if it's strategic, can be very important. In geopolitics, the potential portion of the territory is not necessarily proportionate to the size of that territory. If you go back to the Pacific War, during the Second World War, battles were won and lost because of small rocks, islands like Truk, Tulangi, Saipan, Kwajalein, Tarawa, etc., dotting the vast Pacific Ocean. This is the map of the Pacific Ocean during the Second World War, and a lot of battles were done in these little specks in the islands that were very critical before reaching the Philippines and eventually mainland Japan. So here is Scarborough Shoal. Scarborough Shoal, by the way, is not small. The area, this is the Scarborough Shoal. This lagoon here, the size of this lagoon, which is navigable, destroyers can enter the area. There's a natural channel here. It's about 150 square kilometers, almost the size of Quezon City. So it is not small, it is big. And I'd like to compare this with Ulithi during the Second World War. Ulithi is a similar structure, a little bigger than Scarborough Shoal. But during the Second World War, Admiral Halsey used this as a base for his fleet. And you can see his fleet here, consisting of battleships, carriers, transport, destroyers, cruisers, all inside Ulithi. That's how important the Ulithi was before the Battle of the Leyte Gulf. So that's Ulithi and Bajo de Masinloc. We have gotten intelligence also that China is planning to develop Scarborough Shoal, which is only about 120 to 130 nautical miles from Zambales. This is the plan that they have a runway here, maybe about 3,000 meters long, 3 kilometers long, holiday area, tropical holiday area, government buildings, and then they'll improve the channel to enable more ships to go inside, island water plant, even an island hotel. So that is their plan if they're not prevented from doing so. Now let's talk about the South China Sea and adjacent seas. What are the powers in the region? Because you have to look at the equation here. Of course, the number one power in the area is the United States with their Navy and their Air Force. Next is China, which has quite a big navy. They already have an aircraft carrier, several submarines, some are nuclear, a lot of destroyers, and hundreds of flankers or multi-role fighters, particularly the J-11 manufactured by Shenyang of China. Japan is also a very powerful element in the equation. They have a big navy consisting of carriers, a lot of attack submarines, very big destroyers, and hundreds of very advanced fighter planes like 230 Mitsubishi F-15, and they ordered 42 F-35, one of the most advanced fighter planes in the world today, and they added another 28. This is going to be a game changer the moment they're delivered in the hands of the Japan Air Force. Vietnam is there also. They acquired 5 kilo-class submarines. One is also going additional to be delivered. They have some frigates. They have a lot of corvettes also, and also a respectable air force. consisting of Sukhoi 22, Sukhoi 27, and Sukhoi 30 in the Air Force. Australia is there with the submarines and a very sizable Australian Air Force. India is a very big player in the area because they are very interested in the South China Sea. Of course, they control the Indian Ocean. They have 2 aircraft carriers and 1 is under construction. They have a lot of submarines, a lot of stealth frigates, and quite a big air force consisting of more than 200 Sukhoi 30, which they bought from Russia. Pakistan is also there. As we all know, Pakistan and India are not exactly friendly to each other. So Pakistan is going to be a player also the moment India moves in. They have frigates, they have submarines, and they have quite a sizable air force of about 180 F-7 and some F-16 from the United States. Russia is there, just in the periphery. They have a big navy, they have a big air force, and several ships in the area. And of course, this is the disposition of forces in number of military personnel in the South China Sea area. Now, what is the reaction of the Philippines to the decision of the Permanent Court of Arbitration? Of course, in the headline, President Duterte has stated that he has the interest of the allies to be considered in any plan to talk with China. And to me, this is quite reassuring because he said, and I quote, "We do not also want to offend the United States because we've identified ourselves as allies of the Western powers. The Philippines, but the Philippines must tread carefully because of domestic as well as international pressure." One factor that must be considered by the government is that in March, the SWS conducted a survey and found out that 80% of the Filipino people are in favor of the case that we filed in the Arbitral Tribunal. In other words, that must be considered in considering what is the public response if they go either way. That is very important. That was before the ruling. I'm very sure that now the rating of the Arbitral Tribunal issue will be much higher than 80% because we just won. The Philippines said that the Philippines will have no concessions to China over the Sea Road. And of course, I welcome this statement of President Duterte when he said, "We value the award given by the tribunal and the Philippines will not concede any of the awards given to us." That's very reassuring. We should support the position defined by the TFA Secretary when he said the Philippines has turned down bilateral talks with Beijing over the South China Sea issue after China's foreign ministry insisted that we should set aside the landmark ruling. Of course, that is, to me, if you ask me, that is not acceptable. What about China? What did China say? China has remained to be belligerent. The top Chinese admiral said China is ready to counter any aggression in the South China Sea. He said this in the presence of the Chief of Naval Operations of the United States Navy. And of course, just on the lighter side, some of the Chinese reacted by smashing iPhones, symbol of American interest, and even boycotting the KFC. Not realizing that iPhones, all of them are assembled in China. Out of the 700 parts, 500 are manufactured in China. And of course, in the case of KFC, most of the raw materials are also made in China. We called for, our Secretary of Foreign Affairs, Yasai, called for sobriety and restraint. And how did China react? China reacted by sending a strategic bomber to bust our Scarborough Shoal. In fact, my reaction there is that they decided to up the ante in the South China Sea. A strategic bomber, an HK-6, to bust the Scarborough Shoal. This, to me, is an excessive overreaction to the ruling of the Permanent Court of Arbitration and is a bully tactic aimed at intimidating the Philippines and the other players in the region. I consider this not only unfriendly, but also very hostile. And you know, a bomber is has a radius of about combat radius of about 3,500 kilometers. It can carry nuclear weapons also. What are China's options on the post-tribunal ruling? What can Beijing do, for example? In my consideration of the situation, I think they have three options. Number one is to buy off Manila, the Philippines, with promises of aid, trade, investments, etc. Exactly the strategy in their string of pearls, as well as in getting support for the position worldwide. Or second, they can escalate the dispute by more sea exercises, declare an air defense identification zone or ADIC, or do construction work in Scarborough Shoal. That's going to be really provocative. Or number three, just protest, but do nothing really special. Of course, there's a headline that China is set to declare an ADIC over the South China Sea. That is the report. And if, in my opinion, this is my comment, if China declares a South China Sea air defense identification zone, which for sure will overlap with our exclusive economic zone, Philippine Airlines will have to check with China if that's going to happen. Every time Philippine Airlines will pass through the South China Sea, going to Vietnam, going to Europe, how will the US and other powers respond? How should the Philippines respond if they declare an ADIC? I hope China does not do this, as it would extremely complicate the situation in South China Sea and our West Philippine Sea. Now, what about the US? What is the statement of the US? So here, what we are seeing here are statements coming from the various players in the area. The US said, and they keep on reiterating this, that its forces will keep on operating in the South China Sea. High tension in the meeting of the US Chief of Naval Operations with his counterpart in China. He said they underscored the importance of local and safe operations in South China Sea and elsewhere where professional navies operate. US forces, according to the CNO of the US Navy, will keep on sailing, flying, and operating wherever international law allows. And now that international law says that there is no 9+9, this is their way of saying that they can go there, anywhere. They can approach the features there because they're not considered islands with a territorial sea or an exclusive economic zone. South China Sea ruling bolsters tougher US stance, and I keep saying, here comes the US Navy. They have the Ronald Reagan, it's a super carrier, already based inside the South China Sea. Last week, there was supposed to be a reception of the USS carrier, the US carrier Ronald Reagan in Manila Bay. But they had to cancel this because of operational reasons. In other words, they would not want to go inside Manila Bay because that would, they were sitting back there, they cannot operate while inside Manila Bay. So they stayed outside and remained somewhere in the South China Sea. The ruling of the tribunal forms part of international law. In the forum about 2 weeks ago in UP, the Dean of the College of Law, UP, said that the ruling of the Arbitral Tribunal becomes part of international law jurisprudence and therefore part of international law. Now, Secretary Kerry, before coming here, warned Beijing about declaring an air defense zone for the South China Sea. And they said that it's going to be considered a very provocative and destabilizing act. And Secretary Kerry said, we urge China not to move unilaterally in ways that are provocative. This, to me, is a clear warning that in the case of the US, it is in the Philippine interest to support the state of the US. A China air defense identification zone would overlap and intrude into most of the West Philippine Sea and jeopardize our airspace. China says it is prepared for any military confrontation. Statement, China says they're not afraid of trouble after US warning. So here we have exchange of warning and counter warning. And here's the situation as far as the South China Sea, and it shows you the significance of Scarborough Shoal in the immediate future. China urged to plan for the worst in the South China Sea. This is China media making some noise. And of course, a lot of people